Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's Deidre with Are You a CPS Victim Like Me? I'm joined again by my two co hosts, Darren and Tiffany. And I also have a guest that is joining us this evening that I would like to give a little intro to. And then he will be taking the floor for the majority of the show to share kind of how he's come along with different instances that relate hand in hand with CPS and family court. But again, my name is Deidre. I do these shows every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time under a attorney that practices out of Southern California. His name is Vincent W. Davis, and he's a CPS trial defense, juvenile dependency. I always get that tongue twisted. CPS trial defense juvenile attorney that I do these shows under because I myself was a parent about 5 years ago that got involved with CPS, and the unfortunate comes with it if anybody is familiar with CPS. And I'm still fighting to get my kids back home, which should hopefully maybe be sometime soon. But in the meantime, I do these shows to get the word out to other parents out there that might be going through a case themselves or just, don't have any idea about the corruption that CPS is kind of what I found to be all about. So again, I have Darren and Tiffany who are also parents that have, had a case themselves and also now advocates and fighting for the system to hopefully one day be either abolished or reformed or something definitely needs to be changed. And they're always here to support me. And Darren also has shows on YouTube as well, and Tiffany, and you guys can go find him and follow his shows because he's also doing the same thing that we're doing here. But other than that, our guest tonight is Sean. And I found him, I believe, through a Facebook group. And I asked him if he'd like to come on, and he was all for it. And so a little bit that I found out from him and talking to him earlier today is that, he didn't necessarily have a CPS case himself or, was affected by CPS, but he's been affected in the past by, a custody battle that he had to entail and kind of dove deep into the mental health side of things and kind of took a stand for, fighting for a floor for for fathers to have more of a place to come and kind of maybe get guidance and support in going through something like this. And he also mentioned to me when talking to him earlier today that he is a co-author of a book that kind of deals with family court, which also entails with CPS. So he could talk a little bit more about that. And I guess he could do the rest of his talking. So Sean, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe start talking about all the things that we kind of talked about earlier today.
Hi. Yeah, so my first experience with family court was in 1988. Yeah, I'm old. And I'll never forget because I had two children that suddenly I was having to fight to be able to see. And I had a judge actually look at me after the third time trying to get them to enforce a custody arrangement order. A judge actually look at me and tell me, she's remarried now. Those kids have a father. Why don't you go start your own family?
Wow.
And I was a 28-year-old kid, I know at the time I felt like I was a man, but I realize now I was just a kid, and that hurt deeply. So I kind of followed his instructions. I got to see my kids a couple times a year for the next 16 years, and so that hurt. And I never thought that would happen to me again. But then later on, I found myself in another custody situation for totally different circumstances that I don't really feel comfortable talking about at this time. But that drug me into showing up at a couple of rallies in DC because I live near Washington, DC. And that's where I met Connie regularly, who was with Family Forward Project. And she and I talked at length, and I started realizing there was a lot more to this than just what I was seeing. And so I started talking to more and more people, and I did some mentoring for some of the people in the Family Forward Project over the years, and I became part of Hope for Families, which is the group that book you just mentioned that I was a anchor author for. And it's funny, a lot of the people, for good reason, shared the trauma that they experienced in that book. Me, I always tend to have an approach of I don't really want to talk about my story nearly as much as I want to talk about how do we deal with what we're going through. So that was my focus of my chapter, was identifying the things that we do control in our circumstances, identifying the things we just can't control. It's a little bit like the Serenity Prayer, and then having the wisdom to know what to do in those circumstances. Let go of that stuff you can't control. And focus on the stuff you do have control over, so that you'll have the best chance of actually making a difference in your actual situation. So that's what I was focusing on. But and you see by the thing there, I have this dad to dad peer support platform that I'm working on, and the reason I want to do that is because I find that um, you know we all know that this can affect anybody in family court. I mean, CPS cases affect people equally. In fact, I'd say it probably affects more mothers than it does fathers in just CPS cases. Um, but the simple fact of the matter is, when you're in a high conflict situation, us men, we have the ability to help calm things a bit by not engaging, by not becoming frustrated and too angry and lashing out, and we can really help ourselves a lot and our families, thus our children, by staying calm, cool, collected, not making the mistakes that a lot of guys do. I have a couple of colorful phrases that I use, but essentially, it's don't shoot yourself in the foot. You know, um, and I mean, and I've seen the same thing happen with CPS cases, because this is such an emotional issue. You know, um, you know, it's amazing how, I forget who said it. I had the quote down and I was going to use it tonight, but I can't remember who said it. But the quote had something to do with, you want to see somebody get crazy, take their children away from them.
Hmm. Definitely.
I think it was Amy Baker. Now that I think of it, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Amy Baker. She's a PhD who wrote about a lot about different types of family court situations, but particularly about alienation situations. But people, and yet they use that against us.
Hmm.
I mean, you find yourself in court because somebody's taking your children away from you or withholding your children from you for whatever reason, and then they point their finger at you, go, "Oh yeah, look how they're acting." And it's like,
Yeah,
how would you act, Your Honor? you
exactly.
know?
Not to interrupt you, Sean, but I kind of wanted to have you tell me the story that you told me earlier about how, I believe you said back, whatever year it was, how they started the Great Act, I
Oh yeah.
think, or, okay,
Yeah,
if you don't
yeah,
mind.
yeah. Yeah, one of the fascinating things that I've learned over the years, because I was trying desperately. I mean, I went down the rabbit hole for a while with a group of constitutional experts, trying to figure out how to make constitutional arguments work against the family court and CPS and things, because it's like we have constitutional rights. It says right there in the Constitution we have rights as parents. There are Supreme Court cases that say that we have rights and you can't take them away from us without due process. How are they doing this? I couldn't understand it. It made zero sense to me. And the more I looked into it, and the more I went to the American Family Conciliatory Courts conferences in order to kind of, the first time I went, I actually went in support of Ginger Gentile's film called Erasing Family. Um, and I had the idea while I was there. I started talking to judges and guardian ad litems and stuff, and they didn't know that I wasn't one of them. So I started getting information from them that I don't think they would normally have shared with me. So I started going back every chance I could get. And I've been 3 times now. And the funny thing is I learned a lot. I mean, I first off, most of these people, CPS, I shared this with you earlier, CPS
Hmm.
workers, judges, these attorneys, the reason they can sleep at night is because they have this narrative, this story that they tell themselves that they're heroes. They're doing God's work, and they are heroes. I mean, and it's funny because I remember when we were presenting this Erasing Families, I had an argument with one of these judges, because the judge was just like, "Yeah, I've never seen anything like this before," because the film was mostly about parental alienation, and she says, "There's no such thing; it doesn't exist." We're like, "You just watched the film, how can you say that?" I mean, obviously, there are parents out there who do alienate their children from the other parent. I mean, she says, no, I've been on the bench for 50 years and I've never seen a case.
Mm.
And it's just like, and I learned a long time ago not to argue with people that have, there's no point in arguing with somebody that's got their mind made up like that. So I just said, well, we thank you very much. And I handed her some literature and I went to talk to somebody else. But it
Yeah.
was very frustrating. So after going down that rabbit hole, and talking to people, I suddenly started realizing that the family court system is not the same as the rest of our judiciary, and it isn't affected by the Constitution. And I wanted to understand how. And as I was reading, one of the books that finally cemented it for me was, and I meant to bring it with me, and I apologize. It's a book by, the lady's name is Jane M. Spinak, Spinak. She's an emeritus professor at Columbia Law, and she talks in there about how we need to abolish the entire family court system, period. And if you
Mhm.
read her book, it's a very scholarly read. Her book goes into great detail about how, uh, you know, the juveniles court system in general is broken and it does not do what they claim it does, serve the best interests of the child. And then I went down the rabbit hole of how did that term first come about? And what I learned and what I was sharing with Deidre is about 115 plus years ago, we had a situation here in this country where there were children that they were immigrant children, mostly Polish and Irish at the time, that were literally being put on trains and shipped to prisons around the country. And I mean, obviously, some people, some good people realize this is going to just make worse people. This is not helping the children. So we need to figure out a way to fix this situation and actually give these children a chance to become uh, members of our society that can make a positive difference. So what they did was they created what they called at the time the juvenile court system. And the juvenile court system, it was called the Great Idea. And they came up with this idea that they were going to assign special judges that were highly trained, they called them, highly trained judges that were going to be given broad discretion to rule in whatever way they needed to provide for the best interests of the child. And I know we've all heard that phrase many times. And so what happened was it worked. I mean, obviously, I doubt any of you have even heard about those immigrant children, those Polish and Irish immigrant children that were being shipped in trains, because it worked. It fixed the problem. So, well, you know what happens in our country when things seem to work okay? Well, they think, well, let's double down on it. Let's make it. Let's go with this. Let's run with it. So they built the juvenile and domestic relations court system on top of it. On that same foundation of judges who have broad discretion to rule in whatever way is necessary to find the best interests of the child. So their opinions are what they render in this court, and it operates completely outside of. Now, over the 115 plus years since then, obviously it has kind of become intertwined with our criminal justice system and the rest of the system in ways that are just kind of weird. And that's what most attorneys will tell you. They'll go, oh, well, it's not a completely separate system. It's intertwined. And it's like, yeah, it's still intertwined, but these judges have broad discretion and complete immunity, just like they
Mhm.
did in the beginning. And if you try to bring a constitutional argument into family court, they're going to laugh you right out of the room because it doesn't work. So
I think Tiffany wants to make a comment real quick, Sean.
go ahead, Tiff.
Sorry.
I sure do. Let me tell you, there are 3 judges here. Will not hear a case with my name on it. I'm in Winchester, Virginia, if you're in Virginia.
I am.
Because I know that Article 6, paragraph 2 says all judges have to abide by the Constitution of the United States, or they wage war against the Constitution, which means they wage war against us, the people. Not only that, Butts versus Economy, United States versus Lee. If you start saying that stuff and they still say, oh, you have no merit, I'm dismissing your case. You know what I tell them? I'll see you in federal court. Everything changes then. Oh no, everybody's demeanor switches. Oh no, Miss Wise, we're not done. We're not done. Come back here. Yeah, don't play with me. Do not play with me because I'm going to hold your feet to that fire. But go ahead.
No, so she makes a valid point, and this is one of the places I like to go with people is if you have the wherewithal to get your case into federal court, you absolutely can have your rights. The problem there becomes, and I've worked with many people over the last decade trying to get that to happen. What happens is they catch you on procedural stuff. So most of us don't know what we're doing. Let's just face it. I mean, I like that Tiffany understands some of this stuff, and she's obviously managed to have some success with it, but most of us don't. I mean, I've actually had a guy just last week who got his case into the Supreme Court in Wisconsin, as I recall, won his case in the Supreme Court, and guess what happened? His case got remanded back to the original judge that screwed him up in the first place. And all that judge did was just rewrite a few lines in the order so that he had his butt covered, and now he has to go through the whole process all over again if he wants to get anything done.
Well, sometimes you have to start look, a judge does not have immunity if you charge him criminally, because judges can be charged with violating your constitutional rights. It is a crime. Once they have been charged, they have no immunity, even with civil.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, and I'm waiting for somebody to show me a case where that actually works. I would love to see it because I agree with you 110%. Unfortunately, every time I've ever seen anybody attempt it, they failed. So I agree with you 110%. That should be the case, but I've not yet seen anybody succeed. The second somebody does, I hope somebody brings it to my attention so that I can start using it.
Well, you live here in Virginia, okay? You know,
Ma'am,
they do things a lot different than they do in other states, okay? We're the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it just so I guess where I was going with that whole thing is that, you know, we end up, most of us, and this is the biggest problem in my perception is that, you know, then we start talking about how the laws have to change, et cetera, but then you talk to the general public and they're clueless. I've given talks on other subjects, and afterwards I ask them questions about, you know, what they think about certain aspects of family court and stuff, and people are always like, oh, well, you know, all you have to do is just be right and you'll get the right judgment in family court. You know, it's like, oh, interesting. Okay.
I've learned from the attorney myself that I do this show under, that there's literally no justice in the courtroom as far as what we think justice is on a day-to-day basis. I mean, literally, he does a video about it of what is justice, and he pretty much breaks it down. What me and you think justice would be is not what it is in the courtroom. Not whatsoever.
And I just had a great conversation with an attorney in Utah who actually practices in California as well. He's an older guy, so he was kind of off the hook with his conversation with me. It was kind of fun, and he was just like, it's absolutely insane, the stuff that goes on in family court. You know, he says, you know, I've seen so many cases where they actually catch somebody in lies. He says, I caught this person in tons and tons of lies. You know, a CPS worker in this particular case, as I recall.
Yeah.
And then he's like, when the order came out and everything was done, he said, Your Honor, I don't see anything in this order chastising this person. We caught them in lies. And the judge actually,
and nothing is done.
Yeah, the judge actually looked at him and says, people lie to me every single day here in this court. Do you want me to do you want me to convict every single person who goes before me of perjury? And he was like, well, yes, Your Honor. As a matter of fact, I'd love to see that.
I want you to do your job. That's what you're supposed to do.
And apparently she just said, well, that's not going to happen, counselor, you know, and moved on. And it was just like, okay, because and that's another thing. I see it all the time where people come to me all the time. Well, I've got this person and all these lies and blah, 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 blah. And I always sit there and I listen and oh man, that sucks, you know? And then at the end of it, I have to say, so I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've been looking, and I have not seen a single case of perjury ever in a family court case, ever. I mean, they
Well,
may
and the
exist.
fact that these social workers get to use like hearsay when, us parents totally off the table. It's like, so they
Yes.
can just say whatever they say and say that they heard it or whatever they saw it and it
Hmm.
goes. On the
Yep.
flip side, we could even have the evidence of what we're trying to say, but it's just totally like not set up for any kind of success, I feel like, for these children to either stay with their families or be reunited with their families. I feel like, sorry to cut you off, but just a quick thought. It just, again, like I was talking to you about earlier, it's like, it's just all about the money and the funding and what can they do with the system to make them more money. And the best interest of the children is never, I feel like, on the table when really looking deep into it. I feel like it's the complete opposite. How can we traumatize these kids more by making more money? But sorry, go ahead and go with what you're going with.
So it's funny you should say that, because I will say that I do sometimes admonish people when they go too deep into the it's all about the money argument. But then I went back and I started thinking about my experience at the American Family Conciliatory Courts Conference. I think on one of these days I'm going to go there and I'm going to take a body cam with me or something and try to hide it on my body so I can record what goes on at one of these things, so you could see. It's, if you've ever been to a business convention where everybody's trying to sell their services, that's what an American Families Conciliatory Courts Conference is like. There's tons of tables. Like, that's where I first learned about the Family Wizard and these different apps and stuff that people are marketing to the courts to get parents to have to be able to. Talking Parents is another one. That's the first place I saw those things. But there's all sorts of different counselors, different people coming up with new products that they're trying to sell to the court system. And then you go in and you do the breakout sessions, and these breakout sessions are astounding because they're talk about the problems that you talk about and you talk about and I talk about. They're talking about them. You're thinking, oh my God, something's going to happen. And then years go by and it's like, okay, so it was just talk, because every year the same stuff is on the breakout sessions. They know this stuff is wrong. They
Well,
know that things are broken.
so a couple years ago, CPS and 12 police officers were standing on my property, and I marched their asses right off my property using the Constitution. Anyway, so next month, I am actually working with Poverty Law School in Richmond. I am on a committee to reform CPS and foster care because I told them then, I'm coming for you. And they thought I was kidding. And I'm coming for them. And I'm the most hated woman in my town. The police hate me. CPS hates me. The judges hate me. All but the prosecutors, they love me.
Cool. Yeah.
You can tell Tiffany is our firecracker of the show. She's got that edge that a lot of us parents sometimes need to dig out of us in situations like this, because we get so closed off and scared because, number one, we're humiliated or embarrassed, or two, we don't know our rights, or we don't know what to do to get our kids home. But after knowing Tiffany and working alongside her now for quite some time, she really is that advocate out there that has the knowledge and the years experience, but really has that passion that a lot of us parents lose immediately when our kids are taken. Because again, I mean, that's one of the most traumatic things that a parent, I feel like, can go through. But at the same time, you still can't give up. You still have to constantly keep going and fighting because your kids are depending on you. But that's why I love Tiffany's passion and personality, because it comes across in such a kind of different light in such a dark situation, but people that don't know Tiffany, it's kind of like, whoa, who's this lady, but I love it, and I'm sure you understand because you're from Virginia. So,
oh yeah.
Well, I had a cop say to me one time, you don't take any shit off anybody, do you? I said, not even cops.
So it's funny you should say that, because that's one of the things I do talk to people a lot about, is that there is this attitude that the general public has that whenever you try to share your story about what's happening, you get the even if they don't say anything, you can see the shift in the way they're looking at you. It's that, oh, you must have done something look. It's like, oh, you're not telling me the whole story. We've all heard those phrases before. Even if they don't say them out loud, you can see the script running through their eyeballs. I mean, it's almost like a cartoon. It's like, oh, you must have done something, and you're just not telling me everything here. So I think it is important that we don't allow them to shame us into silence. I agree with you completely. It's, I mean, it's people have been, have chastised me a few times about, well, these rallies that you guys are having, they don't really do any good. It's like, we may not be getting laws changed by having a rally, but we are giving people a voice. We're giving them the opportunity to come and talk about what's going on, because that's important. And that's why I love this show, and doing podcasts like what you're doing, is because it is important. It is important for us to have a voice and to be able to talk about it. And that's kind of the reason why the Dad platform that I'm working on is going to be the way it is, because it's going to be a completely private platform, in a way that hopefully the courts won't be able to come in. They can subpoena me all day long, and I'm not going to give them access to anything that happens on that platform, is my plan. Because what happens is, in a lot of our cases, including my own, my whole social media history, they had a pile of papers this deep. They printed out my whole social media history and had it sitting there on the bench. I was like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. I was like, okay, what's
Darren, my other co-host here, sorry to interrupt you again, Sean, but just thinking of that, Darren, my other co-host, basically, correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, but the ultimate reason why he kind of had his child taken from him and still has not been placed back is because of a podcast, right? That you did, Darren?
Yeah,
and
I started,
he never did get terminated. Yeah, share a little bit.
Yeah, I just did a podcast that was called "That's Our Daughter," and it was basically just told the story of the day-to-day events that was going on with CPS, and they heard that, man, and they punished me big time. They took my kid, and that was it. I never got to see her again. But I didn't stop either. I said, screw you. You want to keep doing this? They already took her from me, but more. And it's 4 years later now, and here I am.
But remember, your criminal charges got completely
everything that they took my daughter dismissed, gone away. I didn't do anything wrong. Nothing towards her, especially.
But you never got your daughter back.
Never ever got to get my daughter back. But no, I just keep going this route to spread the word, and they don't like that.
No, they don't. And that's, then they do that to shut us up and to shame us and to get us to be quiet. And I mean, I advocate for people to understand that they need to be able to talk about their issues. I take eight calls a day on average from parents who are going through this, mostly admittedly fathers, because I am dad to dad, but it's funny, at least 3 times a week, I'm talking to a mother who's going through a similar situation. So I know this is, a thing. And because people have seen me at the rallies for the Family Forward Project and other groups like that, I also get people reach out to me and want to have conversations with me about CPS cases, but that's obviously not nearly as frequent for me because of what my focus usually is. But I've seen just so much, and it's amazing to me that we've got this court system that most people just are completely clueless about. Like I was sharing, when I ask these questions to groups of people that aren't related to what we do, people are just totally, no, what are you not telling us? And they give you these weird attitudes. One of the questions.
I was guilty of that. I was guilty.
Oh yeah.
If someone would have told me they got their kids taken, I probably would have been like, yeah, okay, you must have done something,
Yeah.
And that's the sad part. And then, people's families, like mine specifically, completely turn against you as well, even though you're like their daughter, meaning my own mother. I haven't talked to her since basically my kids got taken, and she's the one I feel like I'm fighting more nowadays than the court in trying to get my kids back home. And it's like, wait a minute here, like they brainwash you that well to where you still believe that there must be something that I'm still not doing correct in order to get my kids home. But now she's addicted to the money that she gets every month and everything else that comes with it. And it's so I still every day wake up and think, I can't believe that this is really the life that I'm living, and that my own mother that raised me is really who she is today, because I would have never, like Darren has mentioned before in his shows, like if you would have told me 5 years from now, like this is what I would be doing, I would have literally thought you were so far off. And to think that, no, this is really my reality. I mean, it's really just unfortunate in all avenues how much it just rips you to shreds as far as that goes. I mean, you don't even want to go outside your door sometimes because you feel like the neighbors are like, where did their kids go? You know, it just disappeared one day, you know, and it's horrific. But that was my thought on that.
We're actually having a rights rally here in Winchester on May 18th because I am so energetic. Okay, y'all probably think I'm drinking like all kinds of espressos and stuff, because when I get to going, I mean, when I get to going, right? But I'm going to teach people that they do have rights and that how to use them, because if all the people like me if people would act like me in court, these judges will back down. I'm telling you, I've done it. They're scared of me. They respect me because I come in. One judge, she was hitting her gavel. I kept right on going, I pay for this courtroom. No, you will not take my liberties. Exactly what I told her. And I said, if you continue, I will leave your courtroom and go call a civil rights attorney. She threw her hand up. I'm going to give you what you want, Ms. Wise, and dismissed my case. That was the last time she ever heard my case, and that was 2016.
And what she's just pointed out is another thing that I talk to people about, is that these judges are taking the path of least resistance in most cases. And therefore, if you do, but the problem is, see, it's a catch-22 though. See, I'm glad that it didn't work this way for her, but I've also seen people do what she did and they ended up spending 30 to 60 days in jail for contempt. Bam,
and that's
just like
illegal.
that.
And that's illegal. And you know what? If this is no lie. I'm always prepared to go to jail when I go to court. No, I'm serious. I give my car key to whoever's with me. I give them the password to my phone. I give them all my stuff. I said, if I go to jail, you got to take the car home because I got the car seats, right? I'm always prepared. But they know if they put me in jail, the repercussions, because when I go in there and speak to these people, I don't play any games with them. They know exactly what I'm saying to them. You cannot go to jail for inserting any of your rights or inserting the Constitution. You cannot. It's called Maximus of Law or something like that. And it's right in there. You can never be detained or jailed for inserting your constitutional rights. You cannot. It's illegal.
Yeah, the catch-22 is, though, they get you on circuitous stuff like being disrespectful.
Well, that's why you got to say with all due respect.
Yeah. Yeah.
But see, a lot of us parents are naive to knowing the rights that we do have and actually asserting them. Like if I were to go into court, even though I know I could say all that, you wouldn't get that out of my mouth at all, because I would just shrivel up and be like, no, don't punish me more, you know? But again, it's like you got to have.
And it's not that. You know what I live by? And this is, well, first of all, everybody knows I hate CPS. Okay. You will drive a wild hair up my behind the minute a CPS name comes out of somebody's mouth. Okay. But I also do not play with people. And I'm going to tell you why. The Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal. I even told the prosecutor, I don't care if they wear a black robe, a badge, or a bum in the street. What you give to me is what I get back. And you are not ready to open Pandora's box over here. I promise you that. So they back down, because I don't back down. If I'm right, I will not back down. Absolutely. You can put me in jail. I'm not backing down. And that's why people, and let me tell you, the hardest pill I ever had to swallow in my life, I swear to God, I swear to you, I thought everybody was like me. No.
Yeah. No. You know, it's funny you should say that, Tiffany, is because honestly, most of us get ourselves into the circumstances we're in because we think most people think like us. We think most people are good people, for instance, and that they think, and unfortunately, people are the side of us that we don't want to think about, the side of us that is selfish and makes decisions for our own good. That's the side we try not to think about. So therefore, we don't realize that that's how most people are. Most of us have that side of us, and when you put pressure on people, they start just doing their own self-interest, and we get screwed because we're expecting people to be the good person that we are sure we are, and we ignore the fact that we all have that selfish person down deep inside us, that does things in our own self-interest and things. So yeah, we can definitely get ourselves messed up with that, because we kind of expect other people to respond in a certain way and they don't. And it's like, what's going on here? So yeah,
John,
I'm right
real
there
quick
with you.
before I forget, because we have about 20 minutes left or so, and I don't want to not mention it, but you've talked about what you're working on right now with the Dads to Dads. Do you want to give a little bit more detailed information? Like if somebody were to be listening right now and maybe want to, join, is it a podcast or is it a
No,
website or?
yeah, right now we're just a Facebook page. And the reason I've
Okay.
done that is just because, you can tell I'm kind of old. I don't particularly like social media. I'm not a big fan of social media, but I've discovered that that's where advertising happens
It works.
now.
Yeah. The
So
algorithm. Yep.
I have the Facebook page. It's called the Dad to Dad Peer Support Platform, named exactly the way I have there, and you can easily find it if you do a quick search on Facebook for it. Um, it's just a placeholder, though. That's not where the platform is going to exist. I'm still working with a couple of different platforms, trying to figure out which one's going to work the best, because I want to create something where we'll have rooms, where people can go. I mean, like for instance, when somebody first comes in, especially dads, when they first come in, they're freaking hot. They're angry. They've got a lot of stuff to burn off. I want them to have a place to go where people will listen to them. The problem we have had in the social media groups that we've had is you end up with with a broad, people who've been in it for 10 years, people who've worked their way through their case in 2 years or whatever, and they're tired of hearing these guys that they've outgrown. So we want to give these new guys who are coming in a place where people will listen to them and not try to devalue their experience. In other words, provide them some validation that, yeah, what you're going through sucks. Allow them to get it off their chest and express what's going on in there. And then once they've graduated from that, they can move on to okay, here's the constitutional rights room. Here's the room where you can go to learn about what you can do for, if this happens, if you find yourself being alienated, how can you deal with alienation? Okay, you're now in a co-parenting situation. How do you co-parent with somebody who doesn't want to co-parent? We're going to have a place for that. I also want to have an the idea that here in Virginia, it's funny because I had a support group in Winchester at one point, back just before the pandemic happened. I used to drive out there every month and have a group of guys get together and we would talk, and just kind of give people I want to go back to doing that again too. We're going to have this international online group to start with, but the idea is going to be that, to me, I think it works best when you got people in person. It's one of the reasons, for instance, that when people schedule calls with me, I really push them to do at least a Zoom call with me, because I want to be able to look them in the eye. Just talking on the phone, there's a lot of human communication that gets lost just verbally. I mean, sure,
Yep.
you can use your verbal nuance and stuff, your tone and stuff like that to help communicate, but even just being able to see the micro expressions on someone's face and things like that, and overall body language can help somebody feel more comfortable in a really stressful situation. So I like the idea of having these in-person groups, and that's why I want to have this Dad to Dad peer support platform, where guys can come in while they're uncomfortable and they just want to vent. They can just text, if that's what they want to do. But then they can have the voice chats, and then they can move to the video chats, and then we're going to expand it outwards. The problem with a lot of this kind of stuff that I've been talking about was that when I first went to launch it 3 years ago, well, actually, the first launch was going to be 5 years ago, and I announced it on an extremely large platform I'm not going to mention, just because I'm not a big fan of them. The very first day after we announced, we put up my email address, And the very next day, I had over 5,000 people sign up for this thing. Within 2 days, I had 7,000 people signed up for it. And I was like, oh God, I'm only prepared to handle like 300 to 500 people in this platform that I've been building. What am I going to do? So I had to back up. And then every other platform that I looked at that was big enough to handle the kind of numbers I was looking at, you got to have money. And I just didn't have it. So now I've got my nonprofit status in place. I'm working with a couple other organizations like Hope for Families, Families for Eternity Advocacy, groups like that are, we're all nonprofits, and we're looking for grants, and we're getting sponsors, and hopefully we're going to have the money to be able to build some of this stuff that we're working on and be able to help people directly. So
Tiffany, real quick, what was the name of that guy that you guys had on, the Wall Street Journal guy? Do you know his name? Do you remember his name? Darren, do you remember his name?
Dave Weigel.
What is it?
Oh, I just had a conversation with Dave.
You would honestly work really well with him, I feel like, if you know what he's doing. That's what I was talking to you about earlier today. I couldn't think of his name, but yeah, I feel like what you're doing and what he's doing.
Dave and his group, we were in a group about like this. There were 4 of us in a Zoom call, and Dave came in, and we all talked. And yeah, we're definitely doing some stuff. I can't really talk about it yet but we're definitely doing some stuff together. Yes.
So I'm gonna get your information, because I'm gonna send you an email that came out in Virginia Lawyers Weekly, and it says, "Yes, Virginia, the Constitution applies in family court." Oh, whoop whoop! And when I give people, when I help people, I give them a copy of it and say, "Make sure you file this with your paperwork."
Awesome. I love it. I look forward to seeing that.
Because like they know it applies. They're in the Virginia Weekly lawyers, whatever. They know. That's why they can't play that with me. I'm going to send you that whole article. It's 4 pages.
Well, one of the issues I've seen played out in California is actually where it first played out was that I don't know if you all are familiar with what a court of equity is. Have you heard that term before? So this goes back to before the United States even existed, into the 1600s in Great Britain, which were a lot of what we do today came from originally. So common law was the only kind of law there was at the time. And that's what a lot of our system is built on, is on common law. The problem is that they realized that the laws were kind of black and white, and you needed to have the ability to give people the opportunity to come in and have disputes and have somebody settle their disputes without having the black and white laws in place. So they came up with what they called courts of equity. And there's actually a phrase you should ask Mr. Davis sometime about this. There's a phrase in the law circles that's equity always trumps the law, any law. And it's a dangerous precedent for us to keep following, because that's where they go. I've seen judges do this, and this attorney that was talking to me said this is exactly what he's seen happen, is when you corner one of these judges and you get them into a corner, if they know what they're doing, they will simply shift the case into being a purely equity case. And then no legal argument will work against it, because it's now an equity situation. And when it becomes equity, no legal situation. Again, I don't understand this completely, so don't ask me to explain it any deeper than that. This
Can you repeat it real quick, though? Can you just repeat it real quick?
This is how it was explained to me, is that equity trumps the law. And I was like, how does that work? And he again went back and again re-explained the situation about how it came into being. And I was just like, but what about the Constitution? He's like, yeah, I know. Isn't that funny how supposedly we have the supremacy clause that says that is the supreme law of the land, and that anything that goes against what the Constitution says is now repugnant, and that's the exact language that's used. It's repugnant and should be stricken. But equity operates on a completely different playing field. Again, we got this whole legal system, and then we have an equity system over here. And that's how family law kind of gets around a lot of our stuff, is because it operates over here and the legal system is here. And it all does fall under the Constitution. But now we've got this separate system out here that's all mushy and wiggly and squirmy and hard for attorneys to even figure out how to work, because you're trained over here and then you're over here trying to work in this. And every attorney I've ever talked to, you try to start getting them to do this stuff, and they're just like, yeah, well, it's a mushy area, and it's like, well, come on, it's really black and white. They're like, yeah, exactly, but equity was designed to get around black and white. It's like, oh God, you've got to be kidding me. So that's where I am. I'm not claiming to be an expert by any stretch of the imagination. That's just where I am in the understanding right now. And I'm still trying to work on it. I'm looking forward to, I've got the contact information for that lady that I was just talking about, the emeritus professor at Columbia Law. I'm still trying to read through her book to pick out some really salient points that she makes in there, so that I can, when I contact her, I can maybe pique her interest and get her to talk to me, because I imagine she gets thousands of messages every day from people trying to get her to.
You want to mention her name and the title of her book again for viewers that are listening?
It's going to drive me crazy trying to remember. If you look her up, if you just look up her name on in Amazon, you'll find her. It's Jane, Jane, the middle initial M, Spinak, Spinak, and it's I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. You know what? Hold on a second. Let me pull up my gallery. I took a screenshot of it recently, so I should have it on here. But essentially, if you type in that, or you type in abolishing family court into the search bar, her book comes up every time. Let me see if I can find the actual screenshot that I took of it. I don't want to waste too much of our time with me sitting here scanning.
Oh no, it's okay.
But there it is. Okay, here it is. It's called The End of Family Court: How Abolishing the Court Brings Justice to Children and Families.
There you go. The title says it in a nutshell. If the read is following by the title, Yes. I think anybody would want to see what it says, especially because she went to Columbia Law, you said?
Yes. Oh, she didn't just go to it. She is an emeritus professor there.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There's even some more clout underneath her title.
Yes.
So,
and she, I mean, in the book, I mean, it talks about her, all the cases that she's worked in, and all the important positions she holds within the family court system. So she's definitely somebody we need to talk to. I mean, again,
yes.
I hesitated in the beginning to even mentioning it to people, because we have to be careful. Obviously, we don't want to inundate her with a whole bunch of people, going at her, trying to get her to help us in ways that maybe she's not
pulling her from what she,
right,
exactly,
in way, and it might just completely turn her off from the whole movement, and I don't want her to do that. I'm really careful about that. So I just, and I'm even trying to be careful. I mean, I've dealt with I've been on Capitol Hill lobbying for many of these things that I'm talking about, and I learned my lessons the hard way sometimes by actually trying to tell too much of my story, for instance.
Real quick again, sorry to be redundant, but I know you said your dad to dad platform is still in the works and you just have the Facebook page, but do you have maybe like a ballpark time frame of like when you might be launching it and where people then can look for it, or just kind of follow you on Facebook to find out the details?
Yeah, follow me on Facebook to start with. We're having our first board meeting here this coming week. And we're just, I mean, I had to back up. Like I said, I thought I could just launch this thing and make it all happen by myself. And that was a little bit of hubris on my part, because I didn't realize how many people needed it. I was just picturing, I mean, hey, I've got these little groups and everything and blah, 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 and it's like, and then I started doing it and I realized, oh my God, this is a huge undertaking. So I actually reached out to people that have large groups, large followings within quote unquote, the men's movement and stuff. And these are people that are really well known, and they were all like, "Yeah, you better brace yourself because you're going to get inundated." So that kind of made me realize that I've got some health issues. I had a brain injury, and I'm not always on top of things. So I realized I got to get a lot more help before I do this. So that's why
Yeah,
I'm taking my time. I'm not going to do this until I can get it right. So
that's
I
good.
mean, it just I just want to be
No, but
really
that's
careful
awesome
not.
because this kind of situation, like you mentioned before, any parent you would think would come on, very like angry or,
Mhm.
overly emotional, but especially when it comes to fathers, and they give off that wrong impression when a situation like this arises. And Darren has said it many times in the past too about like, how do you say it, Darren? Like only a cub, like, or wolf pack, or how do you say it as far as take
I don't know.
any other
You're
species
mixing a lot of my
baby?
sayings together there.
You're mixing
I
I
know
metaphors,
wasn't
huh?
sure
I'm
which one you're going for here.
tongue tied. No, you make a comment a lot of the times where, humans are the only one that basically let people come and take their children and don't basically like fight back as far as like a wolf pack, or you know what I mean?
No, it's just we're the only thing in man, and we're the only species that allows our young to be taken. Anybody else, even chickadees will fight you to the death if they come and take you. We just allow these people with a gun, with a badge, to come in and take our kids. It's like you got no fight at all. But in nature, you're not meant to have your kid taken from you. That is not it. I mean, nature even knows. The Bible says, don't learn from the book, learn from nature. Nature will tell you everything you need to know. And we're not learning because we're not doing, like the one thing that we aren't defending is our children. And that's supposed to be our number one defense.
I can actually explain that if you're interested, very briefly
Yeah.
in a nutshell. The difference between us and the rest of the animal kingdom is right here behind our foreheads. It's called the prefrontal cortex. It doesn't fully form until we're 26 years old, but by the time it does form, it's a logic center that we use to reason things out. And that's where our laws all came from, where our societies came from, why we are so successful. But it also means that the type of stuff you're talking about, we still have those instincts in us in our more primitive brain. And that's exactly what the court system is afraid of, is that we're not going to use our prefrontal cortex to reason our way through this with the court system. We're going to get angry and we're going to lose our temper and let our more animalistic instincts take over, because we do have that tendency. It happens all the time, and the problem is the disconnect between the two. And this is another reason why I do what I do and became so involved in this, is because a lot of people were unaliving themselves because they got to the point where
Mm-hmm.
the battle between their prefrontal cortex and their animal instincts were just they just couldn't deal with it anymore, and I can't be here anymore. And instead of dealing with all that pain that they're dealing with, they just exited. They left. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, I've spoken to so many of their children afterwards, and if they could have just had a conversation with their future children, it would have stopped them, because it's not good for the children no matter what. I mean, no matter how much in that moment we think this is what's best for my kids because they don't need me around being such a maniac. And that's what a lot of them say. I've had them say that to me. And it's like, because there's that conflict going between our logical brain and our animal instincts that are screaming, "That's my damn child." Pardon my language. I
Mm-hmm.
apologize.
No, it's
That's my
okay.
my child. I can't. You're not allowed to take my child from me. Your instincts are screaming that bloody murder, and you're having to overlay that with your logical brain and go, "Okay, well, I'm supposed to be a peaceful human being, and
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to use the court system the way it's supposed to be used, and and I'm going to be a good member of society." And that conflict is really stressful. It causes a huge amount of stress for us. Your cortisol levels rise, and what do people do in order to deal with that? They drink. They end up doing
Mm-hmm.
drugs. They seek out. Social media is another one. I mean, people don't even realize that they're feeding the weakness that they have in them by scrolling through social media all day, especially stuff that supports their beliefs. They're going through it trying to get those dopamine hits to make themselves feel better for this conflict that they've got going on inside their heads. And
Mm-hmm.
it'll literally drive you crazy. So,
Yes.
I mean, that's
Well, we
really
have
what I Go ahead.
We have just a few minutes left here, and I know that you have an appointment to attend to as well. So
Yes,
as we wrap up, Tiffany or Darren, I know Tiffany, you might want to say something now, but any last closing remarks before we end the show?
Well, I got two things to say. One, get me his email so I can send him this because it's going to blow his mind. And second of all, we are having a rights rally. We're going to be in person. Darren is coming to Virginia, right, Darren?
I will come to Virginia. Yes, I will.
He's going on a physical field trip, not a virtual field trip.
So he's coming to Winchester, but we're going to be live when we do it too. And you should come.
I'll be
You're
there.
already here.
Yep.
So, and we'll hook up on Facebook too. So that's all I got to say.
Darren, do you want to share anything before we end here?
No, just May 18th. Put it on your calendars because we're coming. CPS,
all right.
We're coming.
And also, real quick, Sean, his a couple of his shows that he does with Tiffany is called Tiff and Punisher or The Punisher.
Yeah.
What's the name of your show?
It's like Tiff and the Punisher.
On YouTube?
On YouTube. If you look up CPS Breaking News, it's that. You can look up. We have a bunch of other shows as well.
AbolishCPS.com, right? AbolishCPS.com.
Yep.
So just in case you're ever wanting to bypass some time and watch some entertainment, he does his shows too. And if you ever want to come on in the future, Sean, I really enjoyed having you come on and share all the work that you're doing on your end. And, for any fathers out there that are listening, hopefully his platform that he chooses to go with comes sometime soon that you can all be a part of. And if not, follow him on his Facebook in the meantime. And Sean, do you have any last closing remarks or statements you'd like to make, or anything else you want to say?
If people get nothing else from what we talked about today, I just want everyone who is going through this stuff to realize that the shame that we're feeling is normal. I mean, just what you were pointing out earlier is that, I talked about how other people are looking at us with that, you must have done something. Well, the only reason that affects us is because we know in the back, we've got that voice in our heads that's also saying the same thing. It's like, and it's not saying that we did something because we know better, but it's saying, well, everybody knows you must have done something because you would have thought this exact same thing. If you were, before this happened to you, you would have been looking at people with the exact same approach. So we have to forgive ourselves for that voice because it's just trying to protect us. And also don't let people shame us into silence. I mean, obviously we've got to be careful who we talk to because we don't want to put ourselves in a worse situation, but find somebody that you can trust to talk to. That's super important. That's why I want platforms like the one I've got going so that people have a safe place to go where they can talk about what they're feeling and what they're going through. Okay?
That's great. I really think that that's an awesome thing that you're doing. And again, everyone, this is Deidre with Are You a CPS Victim Like Me? I do my shows every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. If you're interested in being a guest on any of my future shows, you can call into the 888 number on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and my producer, Grace, will get you scheduled for one of my upcoming shows. And maybe you can come on and share how you have been affected with CPS or anything similar in respect to family court system. All right, everyone, thank you for tuning in. And until next week, I'll see you then. Bye, Tiffany and Darren. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye, Sean.